Let's begin with the foundations. Welcome to another lecture. Today we consider Mitchell Chase Johnson, an American basketball figure whose path from collegiate point guard to head coach of the San Antonio Spurs provides, if you will, a compact case study in development systems, succession planning, and professional identity formation within sport.
Hello everyone. I'm Priyanka, and I'll be asking questions and trying not to interrupt the professor's rhythm, which, as you'll hear, is like a well-timed pick and roll.
To frame our discussion, Mitchell Johnson was born in Seattle in 1986, played point guard at Stanford from 2005 to 2009, transitioned into coaching through internships and college roles, then the G League with the Austin Spurs, and ultimately became an NBA assistant in San Antonio in 2019. After multiple interim assignments, he was promoted to head coach in May 2025. This trajectory exemplifies the Spurs' cultural emphasis on internal development and responsibility. Before we get to the complexities, a few definitions. The NBA G League is the league's official minor league, a laboratory for player and coach development. An interim head coach is a temporary leader when the head coach is unavailable. Crucially, interim roles can last a single game, or as in Johnson's case in 2024-25, nearly an entire season. The NCAA tournament is the National Collegiate Championship. Performances there often carry disproportionate reputational weight.
Actually, before we go too deep, I want to ask something simple first. When someone is an interim head coach, who gets the official win-loss record? Is that always clear?
It's important to understand that the NBA attributes records to the acting head coach of record for a given game. In Johnson's extended interim stint, the league later clarified that the Spurs' 32-45 mark over the final 77 games in 2024-25 was credited to him, since Greg Popovich coached only the first 5 games. We observed that sources occasionally contain template artifacts. Any stray claims of a 62-20 season with a finals run lack contextual grounding here, and academically should be treated with caution. Moving forward, why does Johnson's career matter? First, it illuminates the Spurs' development pipeline, wherein the G League functions as a proving ground for both players and staff. Second, it exemplifies how internal promotions, sometimes overlooked in favor of splashy external hires, can sustain organizational identity across eras, from Tim Duncan's retirement to the rise of Victor Wembanyama.
I think the next thing we should talk about is how underappreciated this pathway is. Like, we celebrate star coaches hired from outside, but a patient, internal path seems more statistically robust over time, right?
Clearly. The internal path embeds shared language and process memory. In simpler terms, you inherit not only a playbook, but a philosophy. That continuity is especially valuable when a franchise is developing a very young core. On to our next point, a few foundational facts. At Stanford, Johnson set the single-game assists record with 16 in the 2008 NCAA tournament against Marquette, then added 8 more versus Texas. This is not merely trivia. It signals a pass-first orientation that later appears in his coaching vocabulary. He is the son of John Johnson, a 1979 NBA champion with the Seattle Supersonics, linking him to professional norms from childhood. Professionally, he worked as an assistant with the Austin Spurs, beginning in 2016, winning the G League championship in 2018. Joined the San Antonio Spurs staff in 2019, and was promoted to full-time assistant in November 2020, replacing Tim Duncan. Interim head coaching duties arrived in May 2021, and March 2023 for isolated games. Then critically in November 2024, when Popovich was sidelined by a health issue. Johnson learned 2.5 hours before tip-off, and the Spurs defeated Minnesota 113-103 that night. He steered the team for the rest of the season and was promoted to head coach in May 2025. In July 2025, the NBA formally credited him with the 32-45 record over those 77 games.
Maybe that's something we can come back to later. But the speed of that November handoff is wild. 2.5 hours and a win. It makes me wonder how much is system readiness versus individual readiness?
Both, and there is synergy between them. This logically leads us to a personal note. As an academic, I observe that coaching resembles graduate advising. You inherit potential. You construct routines. You curate feedback loops. And occasionally, you deliver a conference presentation with 2 hours' notice. In such cases, structure is a gift you give your future self. Let's proceed to the next point. 3 questions will organize our analysis. 1 historical, 1 counterfactual, and 1 presently unresolved. First, historically, how did Johnson's father's NBA legacy shape his professional identity? It is worth noting that John Johnson's 1979 championship with Seattle placed professional standards in Mitchell's daily air supply, so to speak. We can infer early exposure to team dynamics, preparation habits, and the psychology of roles. When your father's film study and road routines are normalized, you do not mythologize them, you operationalize them. That habitus, combined with Mitchell's pass-first profile at Stanford, becomes visible later in his coaching emphases on ball movement, role clarity, and patience with development arcs.
I'm curious about Seattle's part in this. Isn't it interesting how certain cities produce a lot of guards and playmakers? How might Seattle's culture and OD High School have influenced his leadership style?
Speaking of local ecosystems, Seattle's high school scene in the early 2000s was a dense competitive environment, with O'Day under coach Phil Lumpkin producing leaders who could run a team. Johnson captained, earned multiple All-Metro and All-State nods, averaged 22 points and 8 assists as a senior, and led 2 state championship teams. In this context, leadership becomes routinized responsibility rather than theatrical performance. You manage tempo, read space, and make high-leverage decisions under constraint. That is, in embryo, the coaching mindset.
Building on that, can we say the Stanford assists record in March 2008 was like a public proof of concept? A demonstration that his cognition is oriented towards systems more than hero ball.
Precisely. 16 assists against Marquette, then 8 versus Texas, on the largest stage of the collegiate calendar, indicates an internal comfort with orchestration. Mathematically, his value maximization strategy appears to privilege marginal improvements in teammates' shot quality over personal usage spikes. As a coach, that becomes a philosophy you can teach. Let's transition to another aspect, a counterfactual. What if Johnson had been drafted in 2009 rather than going undrafted and taking a brief D-League and overseas path before coaching? How might this have altered his trajectory? If drafted, a longer NBA playing career could have deferred his coaching start by several years, potentially granting him broader player networks and the authority capital that comes with an NBA tenure. However, his actual path, Tulsa 66ers in 2009-10, a short stint with VF Riga, then a 2011 coaching internship at Seattle University, the University of Portland in 2015-16, and Austin in 2016, accelerated his accumulation of coaching reps. In effect, he traded player notoriety for system fluency. That trade appears to have compounded over time within the Spurs development ecosystem.
Can we maybe now look at style? Would an NBA playing career have changed his coaching style? More relationship-driven or more authoritative in the locker room?
To elaborate, former NBA players often arrive with embodied credibility that can shorten the time it takes for messages to stick. That said, credibility is necessary but not sufficient. Johnson's advantage lies in teaching craft honed through the G League and player development, which maps well onto San Antonio's current stage. A hypothetical NBA playing career might have shifted the slope of his early adoption curve in the locker room, but his present competence derives from years of practice designing drills, film language, and progression plans. Different pathways, different toolkits, both viable in principle.
So yeah, moving on, the present question. How will his relationship with Victor Wembanyama shape the Spurs' future?
This brings us to a pivotal dyad. In 2023, Johnson was tasked with warming up Wembanyama pre-game, creating daily touchpoints for technical feedback. Strategically, this pairing extends beyond routine. It is a conduit. You translate individual development into team schematics. Offensively, that may mean leveraging Wembanyama's gravity through spacing principles, timing-based screening, and high-low reads. Defensively, it implies anchoring coverages that maximize his length while protecting him from overuse in low-yield contexts. The coach-star interface will, to a significant extent, define San Antonio's identity.
What comes to mind next is the challenge side. With a young roster, what frictions will he face? Is it rotations? Patience? Or like the psychology of losing streaks?
Fundamentally, all of the above. Young teams oscillate. Rotational experiments collide with the human desire for defined roles. Development minutes can tax short-term win probability. The coach must build habits that survive turbulence. Communication protocols, late-game decision trees, and consistent film language. With Wembanyama, there is also load management and skill sequencing. You cannot train everything at once. The art is prioritization under scarcity. As we continue, it is worth noting the research problem here. To evaluate long-term impact of a coach-star pairing, we would require multi-season tracking of development indicators, shot profile evolution, turnover patterns in new actions, defensive event distributions, and rigorous controls for roster changes. In other words, patience and well-curated data.
That was helpful to think through, actually. Thank you, Professor.
To summarize, Mitchell Chase Johnson is a former Stanford point guard whose record-setting assists foreshadowed a coaching philosophy built around facilitation and development. Through the Austin Spurs' G League success and San Antonio assistant roles, he rose to interim head coach in November 2024 under exigent circumstances, guided the team to an immediate win, was credited with a 32-45 mark over 77 games that season, and in May 2025 became the Spurs head coach. We examined 3 questions: how family legacy and Seattle's culture shaped him, a counterfactual draft scenario in 2009, and the present unresolved question of how his relationship with Victor Wembanyama will define San Antonio's trajectory. For further inquiry, study the pedagogy of NBA development programs and the analytics of coach-player synergies over time. In conclusion, thank you for listening to another lecture. May your rotations be elegant and your decisions, as it were, reproducible.
So, I guess that kind of sums it up. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Professor.